Morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be here this morning to talk to you about the importance of, especially if I speak into the mouth, be able to hear me. Very pleased to be here this morning to be talking about the importance of development, not just for your employees, for those who have them, but also yourself personally, and of course, ultimately, regardless of your structure, for the success of your organisation. I've worked for over 25 years involved with the development of people, both initially in the hospitality sector, more recently in the accountancy profession. And throughout that time, I've remained convinced that investing both in myself personally, in my development, and those around me has been the way to succeed. So I'm going to take the next 15 minutes or so to share with you some of the reasons why I think it's important, regardless of the size of the business, in terms of investing in development, in particular around skills. And I haven't heard all of the talks this morning, but I understand some of you using models which might not involve employees. And I think increasingly the lines are being blurred, and that even if they're not necessarily your employees, if you're using subcontractors a lot, you may need to extend the learning offer to them in order that they have the skills you need to go forward. So, So thriving rather than surviving, I guess, is what we would all like to be when we run our own business. And I think regardless of the role that you currently have, it's very easy to keep your head down in the day job. And when you look up, the world around you has moved. That was certainly my experience, having moved from in-house to being self-employed. You may not like or agree with all the changes. You may hate Facebook, you may hate social media, you may be a massive fan, but it's there, people use it, and to ignore it is probably not the right strategy going forward. So some of the things that I think are really important where people can add value is about maintaining a competitive edge, growing a profitable business, the response to external changes, and attracting and retaining employees. And I'm just going to touch on those in the context of how it impacts on the workforce. So maintaining, at the moment, many people say we're moving into the fourth, we're maybe already in the fourth industrial revolution. And what does that mean for the workplace? High-speed mobile internet, the Internet of Things, and app, web-enabled markets, machine learning and virtual reality, the role of artificial intelligence, how does it fit in, regardless of the nature of your practice, the use of big data analytics, sometimes this is maybe on the client side rather than the supply side, and cloud technology. They're all things that are going to impact on the way that we do business. It might just be the way we, as business owners, store our files, but they're going to impact on things. So things change, of course, they always do, but the pace of change is ever quicker. And I think you only have to think about companies that were sort of giants such as Kodak and Blockbuster and Nokia to understand the potential risk to an organisation, whatever its size, if it fails to take account of changes in technology or chooses to go against what the market is looking to do. So as we move into increasing digitisation, this isn't just about skills going forward, but about are we utilising the leverage from our digital platforms that we might be putting into the business. So the Federation of Small Businesses did some research which estimates that this is not just engineering, so don't worry, the deficit in digital skills in the UK for small and medium-sized enterprises is estimated at £18 billion annually. That's the impact on the loss of productivity of not having digital skills at the moment. And I was at a seminar yesterday where one of the slides showed that productivity in the UK has flatlined for about the last 10 years. So what's the response? External change, recent review by the Royal Academy of Engineering highlighted the gains through the adoption of industrial digital technologies, but also identified that the biggest barrier to this was the lack of digital skills. Digital infrastructure without digital skills and tools is not going to have any impact on the productivity of your firm, and therefore is not going to help you thrive. I've just from the Q&A session that I just overheard, attracting and retaining employees is obviously a concern for many, and unemployment is at a record low in this country for the last 40 years at 4%. So that's not just in engineering, but that's across the piece. So all employers are, or most employers are experiencing challenges attracting and retaining employees. The characteristics of the workplace that all of us have been in for some years is changing. There are now 5 generations of people in the workplace in the UK. People are working longer, partly through choice, partly through necessity, but they're also seeking more flexibility. Younger people are starting to work later. They're not rushing into the workplace at the age they were previously, and their expectations are changing, and I'm going to touch on that in a bit more detail later. So it's harder for small firms, particularly because of the access large companies have to national and global labour markets to recruit. You're not going to be able to compete in terms of advertising campaigns, so it needs to be about a different offer, particularly in rural locations, and I won't repeat the answer given a little while ago, but I thought it was quite telling about what is it that you can offer differently, and I would suggest that investing in people's skills is one of those areas. So a couple of quotes here which I won't read out, you can read around the importance of upskilling for small businesses. Past president of the Institute, Professor Tim Ibble, talking about the importance of digital skills in particular, and the idea that whoever you are, whenever you qualified, that's enough. And that you don't need to learn any more. It's always a concern for people in terms of medical practice as to how your GP keeps up to date. If they qualified 30 years ago, what system is there for keeping them up to date? Well, that's true in all professions, including HR, as the law is about to change quite significantly in that. So you may have found it hard to recruit. If you have in the last couple of years, you're not alone. Many small businesses and employees have, slides will catch up, going the other way now. And 30% of small and medium-sized employers cite skills as a key obstacle to the success of their business. So shortage of skills in the labour market has a number of impacts on you as a small business owner. It means it's harder to find people to recruit with the skills that you need. It's also, you then have gaps in your workforce, harder to release people to train up into other areas. And some of the consequences, therefore, of a lack of skills would be increased workload for you personally, which is probably not what you had in mind when you set up your own business. Impact on your team, which can often lead to absence or loss of staff in terms of they'll go and find someone that doesn't require so much effort from them. Just move the slides forward, we'll get there. Right. Sorry. Higher operating costs, difficulties meeting client needs. Whilst you're caught up in managing absences in terms of employees, it will also be a struggle to innovate. And I think ultimately the delay by lack of employees or skills that you need to deliver can only have a negative impact on the business. And its worst case scenario, you're not going to be thriving, you're not going to be surviving, you're actually potentially going to go bust because you're not going to be able to meet the expectations of clients, or you may make yourself ill, as somebody mentioned earlier, you're not necessarily going to be able to cope. So these are all reasons, I think, why the question isn't really why should I train my employees and develop myself, but much more what will happen if I don't do that. So I touched on there being 5 generations in the workplace. You may have heard of some of these before. I'll leave you to identify which one you fit into. Millennials was the most recent, but Generation Z. Now, these are people that, by my maths, are sort of just about leaving university now. So these are the people, the graduates coming forward. And I'll just touch on Generation Alpha, which was new to me. Generation Alpha are people that were born, obviously, in the 21st century, have no concept of life without I in front of something. They are fully walking, talking, digitally orientated people. They learn in different ways. They communicate in different ways. I'm not saying all of these are better, by the way, and there's quite a lot of evidence beginning to emerge about the consequence of a focus on digital life and the lack of interpersonal skills. So you might have people that are very digitally able coming forward into the workplace, but far less able and comfortable to deal with conflict and communication with each other. It isn't necessarily that it changes, it's a fuller package, it's just a different package coming forward. So, what do people want? Well, Generation Z, there was some research done, an annual research by an American firm that surveys a million students across the world. And one of the top things they were looking for, so this includes engineering and business studies students, was purpose and seeking to make a meaning in life. They're also looking for a better life-work balance, and I deliberately switched those around from how we normally express it. So they are not, and more recently, Henley Business School, only last month, released that 84% of employees, I don't think this is unique to Generation Z, by the way, are looking for an employer with social impact of some kind. So the expectations, no one wants to work for a tobacco firm anymore. They want to work for an organisation that does good in some way. And increasingly we can see, particularly amongst young people, but not exclusively, the importance of concerns around climate change. And so that's going to be a question people are going to be interviewing their future employers about, I think, increasingly. 78% of employees would stay with their current employer longer if they thought they were invested in their career development. So for anyone who's losing employees or has lost them in the past, this is a key reason for training people. People want to develop. It's easier to develop with their current employer than go somewhere else sometimes. I touched on millennials. Well, you know, the oldest millennials now are 42, so there may be some millennials in the room. I'm sure there are. Maybe Generation Z, who knows. 52% rate career progression and as the most desirable quality in the workplace. So that's over half of people in this age group are saying they would rather have, I'm not saying rather have it than high pay, but certainly rating it very highly. So money isn't everything, as we all know, ultimately in life, but it's obviously important. So what are some of the barriers that small businesses report on training? Two of the key barriers was the cost of training and the lack of relevant training in the workplace. Many small businesses, and this is a big survey by Nesta, found that organisations never done a skills audit, which sounds quite complicated, but ultimately, do you have people with the skills you need going forward? Have you thought about other people close to retirement in your practice? What are you going to do? Is there only one person that knows how to do something? And what happens if they leave? What happens if they're off sick? I used to work for a company with 250 people and only one person knew how to change certain things in the database, and they went off sick for 6 months. It really had an impact on the business. 68% of small businesses believe that their lack of management and leadership skills within their business prevents their employees reaching their potential. So it's not about necessarily their own potential, but they're recognizing that if they don't know how to manage people properly and lead, then that's also not just going to affect them, but it's also going to stifle their employees. So just want to touch on a brief model in a challenge back on the affordability and relevance. That this is a fairly widespread learning model, which is operating on a 10, 20, 70. I'll leave you to read out the exact things, but I'll just draw to your attention two things. For those who drive, think about when you learnt to drive. Some formal instruction in most cases, and a lot of practice, and then a test. Think about, so most people can probably remember that if they learnt to drive. Can you remember when you learnt to walk? No. Obviously, too young. But there was no formal course. There wasn't a lot of money spent on it, but there was a lot of trial and error. Yeah, for those of you who've tried to encourage small children to walk, you'll know this. And it's very much the human way of learning is to learn through experience. So in response to I can't afford to train my people, or I can't find the relevant training, I would challenge you to look from within. That actually a lot of people, particularly if they are quite well established in their career, get a lot of satisfaction out of passing on knowledge to other people. So you have got some knowledge inside your organisations or from peer organisations which you can lean on and leverage into your own organisation. So it doesn't all have to be about formal master's degrees. They have their place, of course they do, but it doesn't all have to be about formal, expensive training. A lot of learning is done through trials, so it's just about creating the opportunities for people. So, coming to an end, so for me, staff development creates you a thriving edge for your business. It's a critical factor going forward in attracting employees. This is what people are looking for. They're looking for career development and opportunity. It may not always be with you for the whole time, but you could be part of their journey. It strengthens staff motivation and commitment when they do have investment in themselves. You're reducing the risk of failure, be that single point of failure being you or someone else in your team. Individual performance could improve, the overall performance of the organisation could improve. And without over-egging this particular one, it also enables you going forward to leverage digital technology. I'm going to leave you with, for those of you who do use social media and LinkedIn, you've probably seen this quote a lot. Some attribute it to Henry Ford. I couldn't get that categorically confirmed, so I'm not going to say it is Henry Ford. But what if we train our employees and they leave? And what if we don't and they stay? And that is the dilemma that all organisations, I think, have. So I'm going to leave you with two statistics that I picked up recently. The average spend in the UK on employee training is £300 per year. There are just under 3,000 vacancies for structural engineers on Indeed on Sunday evening in the UK. That's just in 1 week, one snapshot. And the average cost of recruiting is estimated to be £11,000 and £30,000 based on not just the recruitment campaign, but the loss of productivity of replacing somebody. So you can do the math as to the cost of training versus the cost of recruiting. So I think I will leave it there. My time is up. I've got a couple of minutes now. Overachieve now. What can I say? So thanks for listening. I'll just, contact details are on the slides and I know they're going to be shared. Very happy to take questions as part of the panel and then at lunchtime if anyone wants to talk more about training. But I hope I've left you with some food for thought. Thank you.